Good afternoon, and thank you for coming, folks. We're getting towards the end of the day. I'll be talking on energy, yes, but I'm upset. I'm upset because of all of the chit-chat that I've heard around the conference. Everybody is advocating a particular single energy system. Why doesn't the world go totally this or totally that? Well, I'm here to argue that the world of energy will not ever work like that. We need options. So I think of this as my Mr. Miyagi speech, my attempt at balance, wax on, wax off, a little bit of everything, because that's what makes a stable system. Balance is the unwritten rule for a stable energy supply industry. Modern complex countries, systems, the world as we have it, is too complex for any one energy system, and they all have foibles of one sort or another, to operate. Be it on the renewable side, that when the wind doesn't blow or the sun doesn't shine, you don't have the power, to nuke power, which tends to be super big centralized stations that when they go down, they really go down and shortages might appear, to fracking for natural gas or conventional natural gas, and nobody wants it in their backyard, coal because of apparent global warming caused by man with CO2 from coal. They all have their idiosyncrasies. So what we need to do to construct in this world and in our countries, which is what I worry about, is a balanced energy supply system, motive power and electrical power. Okay, let's just do a few slides. And by the way, on the very last slide, my website will have all of this material, and it's far more than I want to talk about specifically today. It'll be on www.droletenergy.com. droletenergy.com. Simple as that. Look at the global energy use by energy source right now. We say we're not in a fossil world. Take a look at some of those figures. Take a look at where hydro is. Take a look at where renewable actually is. We are a fossil-driven world right now, to the point of 78.6% of all of the energy, be it for motive power, electrical power, or thermal power, comes from a fossil source. That's the reality today. World energy consumption, look where it's going. Look what the experts from the EIA, at least, backed up by other agencies in Europe, think the world is going to do in terms of future energy growth. Look at the OECD countries, us, Europe. Look what we're doing. We're leveling out, and look where the growth is. That's reality. It truly is. I wanted to make a point by this chart not to degrade or denigrate any particular power system, because remember, my thesis is that we need it all. We need them all. So if you look at that particular chart, look at the renewable portion, and it says 8% of the USA energy consumption comes from renewable. But look at the makeup of that renewable. What do you see? Most of it is hydroelectric, is wood, is biofuels. Look at the little bit at the top where solar, geothermal, and wind is. So if you take what is actually happening in... Is it going to fall on me? If you take a look at what's actually happening in the U.S., it's true to say that today, 1.3% of the energy consumed in the U.S. is by renewables minus hydroelectric and wood. That's reality. So should it get to be more? Yes. Where do I personally think it will peak? for solar, wind, and geothermal, somewhere around 7 to 8 to 9% of the total. Not 50%. I know what Mr. Obama says. I don't agree with it. I don't agree with those advocates that say it should be 50%, because I'll be darned if I know how to make the grid system operate in the middle of the night when 50% goes away. World electricity production by particular source, you can see that again, coal, oil, natural gas still dominates, and the others, which is the renewable portion and so forth, is creeping in there, but it's a pretty slim orange sliver. Again, look at the issue of global warming. I don't want to get into it today, but if you're interested in what is producing, or which portion of the fossil spectrum is producing the CO2, you can take your pick there. 2012, it looks like coal is still a dominant one. By the way, in China today, a coal-fired power plant of at least 300 megawatts is coming online every 3 weeks. And is that going to be like that for a while? You're darn tootin'. They're projecting another 25 years of growth of that sort of order as long as China hangs in together. And by the way, you know what Peter Schiff thinks, if you were here, about that particular thing. World coal consumption, just to make the point, is it bending over? Is it going away? Is it gone? All of the official projections, if you take the world driven by China, Australia, by India, and so forth, coal will continue to rise in terms of total consumption in our world for another 30 to 40 years. Total oil imports by country into the U.S. A little chart you can look at later, but I just wanted to make the point that Canada is the U.S.'s biggest supplier of oil. Despite what is going on with the pipeline debate and whether Obama will approve it or not, Canada's biggest problem on the energy supply side, as you know, is no longer does it have the sources or the ability to get it out of the ground. We can frack just as well as anybody in the world. We've got SAGD, we've got oil sands, we've got lots of conventional and unconventional fossil fuels. Our problem is distribution. Our problem is access to the markets. Our problem is getting it to the West Coast or to James Bay or wherever these new theories go about where it should go. By the way, the people that talk against getting Canadian fossil sources of energy to other parts of the world, they've discovered that the best way to stop us cold is on the distribution side. You notice they're not going and looking at the few oil-covered ducks up in northern Alberta anymore. They've got high-profile movie stars stopping the distribution to the West Coast, to the States, and so forth. That's the way it is. Okay, this is probably the single most important concept I wanted to get across today, other than my overall theme and desire for a balanced energy system, is a concept called energy returned on energy invested. So bear with me for a moment. If you look at the leveling out, or this is a different way of looking at it, look at hydroelectric power. You virtually get all of your energy back because it doesn't take that much energy to build your dam structure. Look at some of the ones at the bottom. Look at ethanol from corn. It's barely positive energy balance. And that's the truth. In fact, I participated in a DOE task force that actually drew a boundary around all inputs to ethanol as we use in our mixed gasoline for our cars. And I'm going to tell you, from my point of view, it's a negative balance. There's more energy used to get ethanol from corn. From sugar, different point of view. I wish the sugar lobby in Florida would go jump in the lake and allow us to get sugar-based ethanol going. Now that's got a positive energy balance. Here's another way of looking at the cliff that we're actually on as we go through some of these other energy systems like biodiesel, like biofuels, and so forth. They're all good, but the energy invested, energy return balance is getting worse and worse and worse as we go on. Something for society to think about as we race towards natural fuels. OPEC, just a comment as we get into oil, to say that the last quote, the one I got in red, is the main one. The report from OPEC has acknowledged for the first time ever, their latest, that they're worried about fracking. They're worried about us getting cheap natural gas, more unconventional oil from fracking, oil shales. All of a sudden, the Middle East is not quite as secure as it used to be. By the way, as an international person, I don't believe any country, single country, should be having as its goal to be energy independent. I don't think that's the right goal. But dominantly, internally productive on energy systems, yes, sir. But there are things that other people do better than we do. So let there be some dominance on the home front with inputs from without. Oil production, everybody says, Saudi and Russia, they're the big guys. The United States is now producing more oil than any other single country in the world. It's a fact, and it's getting more. Look at this particular chart, which shows that the demand for oil in the States is going down as the amount of production is going up. That's interesting. Look at what they say in only 2 to 3 years will be the growth in oil in various countries. Some are going to tend to go negative. Venezuela, for instance, especially if it gets unstable with a regime change. Canada is, I believe, the 4th bar on that list. The States, though, is going to grow bigger and better than anybody with the oil shale finds that they've got going right now. I won't bother with this oil consumption intensity as a function of GDP other than to make the point that per unit of GDP that we make in our country, Canada and the States, we're getting more efficient at using less oil to do that GDP growth per dollar. On cars, boy, I don't know how many of you read that particular headline a little while ago that 54 miles per gallon is the goal by the Obama administration 20 years from now for all of our average motor vehicle fleet. Do you think we're going to make that with internal combustion engine mods and tweaks? No, we're not. We're obviously headed towards a more all-electric future, but we're displacing the source of energy from the gasoline in our tanks to the electricity production system where we'll burn coal and oil and natural gas and nuclear power and hydroelectric power. So there's that big debate about who's fooling who about the source of the energy. But I'll just say that battery-based mode of transport is a policy decision that is being pushed by governments, and so be it. That's where we're going with electrical vehicles. I made my point about ethanol. I just plain ordinary don't believe it's worthwhile based on corn. I just want to make this point. Guess what? We're driving less. This chart is actually a vehicle-adjusted miles driven on all roads in the U.S. It's bending over. We as a society in the States and Canada, this is true, are driving our cars less. Another threat to those that are supplying oil and refined gasoline. I'll just make a point about the Three Gorges Dam only as a way to say that hydroelectric power from big dammed river systems is virtually complete. It's done. It's developed. There isn't a lot more. It's the best EROEI that we got, but there isn't a lot more. However, on the smaller side, I call it run-of-the-river or small dams with horizontal turbines, even in tidal power, there is quite a bit that we can develop. But I wanted to show you the figure of roughly 900 gigawatts in 2006 worldwide to 1,000 and a bit now. Maybe by about 10 years from now, that'll be 2,000 gigawatts, which is still a relative drop in the bucket. So hydroelectric power, one form or another, is not going to save us. On the nuke side, I'll just declare a bias. I'm a former nuke. Scratch me a little bit, you might find some radiation, but you're going to get a nuke. I believe in it. I worked in it for many years. I helped build Ontario Hydro's nuclear fleet and worked on it elsewhere internationally. However, today's stations have three major problems. They're too big, and they're getting bigger. Areva, Westinghouse, Toshiba, they're all marketing these 1,000, 1,200 megawatt systems. When in fact, if you look at any franchise utility district that wants to install a nuke, they'd rather have a system sized for the growth that we get annually on that system. And that might be 200 to 300 megawatts. Hence, what's happening, I'll just run through this to make a point. Hence the adoption of small modular reactors. Those other slides just show you how some of the bigger systems work. I am hoping, I am working on, I support smaller, modularly built, where you make in the factory the reactor system and move it to site and install it quickly. And even though the economy of scale argument would say, hey, Drolet, what about the cost side? We think that because of passive cooling, modular building in a factory, less site work, that in fact the economies of scale on the smaller nukes are going to be better than the big ones. But we'll see. They've yet to come, but I'm an avid supporter of that's the way the nuclear industry should be going, and they're not going that way at the moment. Just a little note to say that on the uranium side, you'll remember that the reason we went with uranium as a fuel for nuclear power was because of really one guy. His name was Admiral Rickover, who was commissioned to develop a weapons system for the US military called the nuclear submarine. And he was a raving success, one of the best managers. Some of the books and articles I've read on how he managed to bring that through, compartmentalize, modularize, make small a very dense power system like nuclear power was remarkable. Anyway, what the US government said is, okay, we'll make nuke subs first, but then we want nuclear power for general electricity production. But by the way, we want to make nuclear weapons as well. Well, the only fuel cycle that allows that to happen is uranium. So for the record, that's how it got going, and that's how the world works right now. But there's another nuclear system called thorium. And it's a fuel cycle. I'm not going to spend much time on it, but I am going to give it its due. At Oak Ridge, back in the 50s and 60s, a team of people led by a brilliant scientist developed a non-weapons related nuclear power fuel cycle system. It's called the organic or fluoride type liquid cooled thorium reactor system. It got kiboshed by the US government because they said we don't want to divert from our weapons and nuclear power for peaceful purposes program. But there's a lot of people that are working at it as private citizens in North America, in Canada and the States. I'm one of them, and I hope that within 20 years it'll become a reality, because guess what? There are $2 billion a year being spent in China with 1,200 PhDs developing the thorium reactor system. Ditto, about a third of that in India. Well, 20 years from now, do we want to be buying our nuclear power thorium systems from China and India? Well, that's the road we're on. I just throw up the flag that if that's what we want, let's keep going the way we're going. The US government is still dead against bringing thorium back. Shale gas. I'll just mention that it's the revolution everybody talks about, fracking. The horizontal drilling fracking has allowed us to access a lot more energy in natural gas than we ever thought. Instead of drilling vertically, we now go horizontally into the natural gas bearing seam, and a lot more natural gas therefore comes out. That's the good news. There's 32 countries with 48 major shale basins. Natural gas through shale is now more, quote, democratic. And I mean by that, it's available all over the world. It's not just Texas. It's not just Alberta. It's not just the Middle East. It's all over parts of Europe. Look at the whole northeast and to the southwest corridor in the US. Look at Brazil. Look at Argentina. Lots of it. And they're still finding major basins. So it is a source that all of us are going to hear a lot more about. It's a true revolution. This isn't an evolution. However, on the cost side, let's not run away with it. Right now, at $3.60 on average, production people are losing money. So I'm not advocating investing very much money in some of these producers until they get up above roughly $4 to $4.50 a million BTUs, and then start to pick your favorites. By the way, I'm not here to tell you my favorites. I'm a very poor investor, but that's the way things are going. This is just a map of the states to show you more detail, and you're hearing a lot of bitching from areas in the Northeast that they don't want the derricks in their backyard. So the northeast of the US and other parts and Canada are going through what happened in Texas in the 20s and 30s when nobody wanted derricks on their property. But they worked through it, society adopted it, and gradually became used to it. We'll see what actually happens, but it's an energy source supply system that is waiting to be had, not at the low cost of today, but slightly 30% more than it is today. Just a chart, I'll leave it for your later perusal on the website about the amount, but certainly there's a lot of shale gas. By the way, when you first get into these seams, there's a rush of natural gas out, and it does peter out gradually, but net, the amount of natural gas you're getting out is remarkably high compared to the vertical drilling. There's the growth in the different parts of the US, be it the Eagle Ford, the Barnett, other shales, the Montney and the Bakken, the famous Bakken, but it just shows you how the growth is estimated to happen with time as we go out to 2017. A rule has been broken. 1,000 cubic feet of natural gas contains the same BTUs, heat value, as 1 barrel of oil. And that's known as the 6-to-1 rule. So if we were all fair and oil is $100 a barrel, then divide by 6, I think I get 15 or 16 or something, then gas should be $16 a 1,000 cubic feet. What is it, $3.60 or something right now? That shows you the discontinuity based on heating value, but that's the law of supply and demand. It's the way it is. We're finding so much natural gas that it's flooded the market. And until they cut back, or the amount of shale oil that's produced in the States drives the price down internationally, because it's a much more fungible quantity than natural gas, which is somewhat islanded, then there you go. Variable cost of fracking. Watch what field you go into Here's just some international examples. In Mexico, it's $15, $16 million to drill a well. Whereas in Huron, in the US, it's only 2 million, less than 2 million a well. So be careful when you're looking at fracking and natural gas companies to know the average cost of drilling in their particular reservoir. The devil's in the details. Break even for natural gas in most basins, I've drawn a line there, at around $3. That's actually moved up to around $4 on average. That chart's dated a year. I apologize, I haven't got a new one made yet. Sentiment against fracking. I thought, stop fracking with our water. There you go. There's a lot of anti-feeling about it, and it's because they're in everybody's backyard. Not my backyard is alive and well now with this new industry. LNG, if we're finding a lot of this natural gas, surely we're going to be exporting it. 5 years ago, we were building LNG import terminals. Now we're building LNG export terminals. How quickly life changes. Japan, Fukushima, it was mentioned earlier. I've been there several times, but just to make the point that at Fukushima Daiichi itself, with the 6 reactors, of which 4 were damaged very severely, it's still a mess, but it's a very stable mess. I anticipate, from what I've seen, that it's going to be about a $120 billion exercise and 12 to 15 years to clean that site up totally. They need to be careful. They're building robotic machines now rather than getting on with the dismantling exercise because the radiation doses within the plant site are so high. Anyway, all of those reactor systems we've read about in the paper. The new leader, Mr. Abe, says he's going to try and start them up. The Japanese people are dead against it. So those people that think, don't count me amongst them, that they're going to start up all of those Japanese reactors pretty soon, and therefore the price of spot uranium will drive up quickly. I'm not there. Yes, I'm there eventually because of the megatons to megawatts warhead program that's coming to an end, but I see it coming in 2 to 3 years, not this year. Sorry to throw a wet blanket on that. I got enough hell the other day when I talked about this specifically. I want to give a little plug to a whole new energy system, a whole new way of thinking, and I'll declare my bias. I'm involved in this particular exercise. A couple of companies, a Canadian company, Greenwell, private, Solagen, US, San Antonio-based, private, are going to be generating electricity from oil and gas wells because all of those 1.1 billion abandoned oil and gas wells in Texas, and I'm just using Texas, some of them have under it these sophisticated hot brine fields. And you can take that brine liquid up and generate electricity from 3 or 4 types of machines, different machines, and form little IPP utilities. So watch out for those guys. I think that'll be some innovation that may come later this year. On the wind, I've made my point, and solar, we should do it, we are doing it, but never ever forget 2 issues. That the sun doesn't always shine, the wind doesn't always blow, and that's okay. That means we need storage systems, and they are developing storage systems, but most of the big ones, based on vanadium or antimony or anything, there are some that are better than others, the capital cost of the battery system itself is at the moment making it difficult to make it economic on a utility basis. But for small applications, energy storage will make wind and solar better. Last slide. I just wanted to remind everybody that there is a hierarchy of the cost of power from electricity generation. And look at it. The solar verifiably averaged worldwide is about 30 cents a kilowatt hour. Now, sometimes you can read figures that it's as high as 50, other times it's 20, because they take into the cost of the subsidization and take that off their cost base. But I think that's a pretty fair sort of assumption. You get geothermal right in the middle, but your cheapest ones still are natural gas and coal at the far right-hand, or left-hand side, pardon, right-hand side of your graph. Well, there's the website again, droletenergy.com. That will be up by 6 o'clock tomorrow night. If there's, I don't know, we have another speaker right now, so there's no time for questions, but thank you very much for your attention.